Okay, so hopefully you watched how to take Cornell notes. So I'm going to help you set them up. So you're going to have essential questions. You want to put the date as well. And then you can put dates, ideas, questions. I'm going to have you do questions in the column here, in the margin, I should say. You can have your main notes here. Honestly, this is going to probably spill into the back as well. And then if the last thing you're going to do is summarize. If you're doing notes on the front and the back, obviously you only summarize the entire notes, not the front and the back. And then you're going to do an EQ. We're going to do this Avid style Cornell notes. So your EQ is how did feudalism develop in Western Europe? Again, because this is a recording, you can pause and then move on. I'm going to move on. You're going to set up your notes with secondary questions in the margin. So here's all of them. I want you to have the first thing that I'm gonna talk about are who are the Franks, and so you're gonna write that in the margin, and then you're gonna skip some lines. And so as you can see, because there are 5 secondary questions, you're probably going to probably do 3 on the front and 2 in the back, or you know 2 in the front and 3 in the back. It's up to you. But I'm going to talk about who were the Franks, who was Clovis, who was Charlemagne, and how did people in Western Europe prepare for raids from Vikings, Magyars, and Saracens. And then there's a video segment that I want you to watch. Who were the Vikings? So, when you were doing your Fall of Rome map, you came across a map that's very similar to this, showing you all these barbarian tribes. A barbarian tribe is anyone that didn't follow the Roman way. And so after the fall of Rome, this is what Western Europe looked like. And all of these different kingdoms are barbarian tribes. Okay. And you've got um, separate kingdoms that are vying for power. And Clovis here is in the kingdom of the Franks, and he had the greatest army and at some point the largest land area. Although on this particular map, you show some other ones that are a little bit big as well. You'll see the Byzantines here. That is an extension of the Roman Empire. They just went to Constantinople. So, who were the Franks? And so, we're answering the first question from the margin. They were a Germanic tribe that would be in the modern area of France. And so Franks, France, that's where we get the name for that country of France. They developed a new style of warfare that depended on troops of knights who were heavily armed. Now, when I say heavily armed, for this particular time period, which is the Dark Ages, these are the earliest knights. Later on, you'll see knights with their metal armor. That's later on. Okay, um, and they fought on horseback, but not always. And who do you call a warrior that fights on horseback? You should know it. Cavalry. To hold power, a ruler needed the services and the loyalty of knights. And in return, the ruler would reward knights with land and privileges. Okay, and I'm gonna talk about feudalism in the next set of notes, and that is fealty, which is loyalty. This is an example of Frankish knight. Okay, next item, question, secondary question of who was Clovis. Clovis, at age 15, became leader of the Franks, and he defeated the last great Roman army in Gaul, which is an area in northern Europe, and his 30-year reign expanded the kingdom. He also started to convert, not necessarily on his own, but the fact that he converted to Christianity because his wife was Christian, many of his subjects followed suit. And so some historians give him credit for, Christianizing the Franks. Who was Charlemagne? He ruled for over 40 years, and many historians think that he was the greatest warrior and ruler in the Dark Ages. He encouraged education and scholarship, but ironically, he was illiterate. Illiterate is he was unable to read or write. And so he often had scholars read to him because he had a thirst for knowledge. He unified the Christian lands and he set up a deal with the Pope at the time, which was Leo III. That's the head of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church at this time had a lot of land and converts. And we're going to see more of that later on. The Pope declared Charlemagne the Holy Roman Emperor. And in return, Charlemagne, who has another name, Charles the Great, backed the church with his army. Later kings copied the system that the Franks used by rewarding knights. In exchange, they would give them land. All right. How did the people of Western Europe prepare for raids from these groups? You have the Vikings, who were boatmen from Scandinavia, that's Northern Europe, who were known for pillaging and destroying villages. And initially, they would just leave and take their booty back to their home villages, but then later on, they would start to stay. You'll watch part of a video later on about them. The Magyars are horsemen from Central Asia, and the Saracens or Muslims are from North Africa or the Middle East. And these are followers of Islam. This map shows, it's hard to see, but it shows the Viking routes in kind of an orange. You've got the Saracens, which are in like a turquoise, and then you've got like almost like a purple of the Magyar raids. Okay. Now, in European history, the Vikings really put their stamp on Europe. Um, we don't know exactly who, but some of the engineers of boats came up with a design where the boat can not only travel up rivers because it had a shallow heel, but then it could also withstand the currents and the waves of the open ocean. Okay, before that time, you really had to hug the coast if you were going to go out to sea, and if you had a lot of waves, you might have your boat turn over. And there are also depictions of these Viking boats with they got their shields on the back. It's kind of a storage area, and then a lot of times they'll have some sort of terrifying image, and this looks like a dragon. There's a reproduction of a boat. Okay, so one way that people prepared for raids is they started to in Europe, more in the western southern part of Europe, they started to have mounded villages. And that way, it's a little bit more difficult to um, go raid because you have to go up this mountain, and you can also um, you could defend a lot better because you have the advantage. You're up higher, and then that turned into lumbered walls and larger structures, and then they started to use stone as a building material because the Vikings still were getting into many of these villages. And that's going to lead to castles and keeps and moats and all of these defensive strategies to keep people out. So you have these protected manors that are kind of turning into castles, and this would be a modern castle to this day. You can see the moat there, um, and really the only way to get in is through the drawbridge. And then there's all kinds of defenses that we're going to talk about later on. But we're not done with castles.